Hello guys, welcome back to our video. Today we are still treating on the cardiovascular system, but right here right now we'll be doing the interior of the heart, and then later on we'll be treating on blood flow through the heart. So make sure to stay tuned to the end of this video. So this is the interior part of the heart. Here we have the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. We have the right atrium, we have the right ventricle, and then we have the pulmonary valve here. We have the pulmonary valve, and here we have the arc of aorta, and then we have the branches of the pulmonary artery, and then pulmonary left pulmonary vein. Here we have the right branches of the pulmonary artery and then the right pulmonary vein. And here we have the left atrium. We have the left atrium, and then we have the aortic valve, and then we have the left atrioventricular valve. Then we have the left ventricle, and we have the cordia tendineae here, and then the papillary muscle, and then we have the interventricular spectrum. You understand the function, what it does when we start learning about blood flow through the heart. But normally the heart is divided into left and right by this interventricular spectrum. And this this spectrum is consisting of a myocardium and enclosed by the endocardium. We know that the endocardium lines the chambers and the valves. So the spectrum divides the heart into left and right, but at birth there is no communication between the left and the right parts of the heart. Then those the atrium opens into the ventricle through this valve, and it's called the atrioventricular valve. But this one most precisely is called a tricuspid valve. Yeah, it's made up of three flaps. And why the left is the left atrioventricular, which is the mitral, and is made up of only two flaps. And this valve is just endocardium, is lined by endocardium, two double flap of endocardium strengthened by fibrous tissues. And what those valves does is that it prevents backflow of blood to the atrium. It enables one-way blood flow through the heart. See, what is all like when the blood in the atrium goes into the ventricle, it prevents the blood going back to the atrium. That's what the valve does. And this valve, it opens and closes passively. And what do I mean by it opens and closes passively? I mean is that it doesn't open on its own. Because it doesn't have muscle. It has no muscle, and instead their opening and closing is controlled by the pressure of blood in each chamber. See, for example, the atrium here. When the pressure in this atrium is higher than that of the ventricle, it's going to cause the valve to open up and allow blood to fill into the ventricle. While the pressure of blood here, the pressure of the ventricle is higher when it contracts, that is the systole. When it contracts, it's going to shut up this valve. It's going to close it up to prevent backflow. So that is what I mean, that it opens and closes passively. And here we have the cordia tendineae. I know you were wondering what is the function, what is their duty in the heart. What it does is that when this valve is opening up, it prevents it from opening upwards into the atria. So meanwhile, this valve is opposed downward like this. So this cordial tenderness prevents it from opening this way upward, and it's attached the inferior part of this valve. It attaches it to the papillary muscle. Yeah, this papillary muscle is just an extension of myocardium that anchors this cordial tenderness to the ventricular wall. So that's the function of this both this cordial tenderness and this papillary muscle. Hope you understand it. So we'll be going over to blood flow through the heart. The largest vein in the body, which is the superior and inferior vena cava, is going to empty its contents, which is deoxygenated blood, into the right atrium. And then this right atrium, the blood there is going to enter into this ventricle through the valve, the right atrioventricular valve is going to enter into the ventricle. And then when it enters and the ventricle contracts, this valve is going to shut, and then the ventricle is now going to pump the blood into the pulmonary artery, which is the only artery, which is the artery that carries deoxygenated blood, and the blood is going to enter through this valve, which is the pulmonary valve. The blood is going to pass through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery and into the lungs. So for exchange to happen, for carbon dioxide is going to be excreted and oxygen is going to be absorbed. And when it happens, it then goes up, enters the heart through this pulmonary vein, which is the vein that carries oxygenated blood, the only vein that carries oxygenated blood. Then from there, it will enter the left atrium. It's going to enter the left atrium, and then from the left atrium, it's going to enter through the left atrioventricular valve into the left ventricle. And then when the ventricle contracts, the blood is then going to enter, going to be pumped into the aorta, and those aorta is guided by a valve, still the aortic valve. So blood, when the ventricle contracts, blood is going to pass through this aortic valve into the aorta and then push into the body. You see? So a recap on the blood flow. The largest vein, which is the superior and inferior vena cava, is going to empty their deoxygenated blood into the atrium, the right atrium, and then the blood here, when the pressure here exceeds the pressure in the ventricle, this valve is going to open up and blood is going to pass through there into the ventricle. And when the ventricle contracts, this valve is going to shut, and then it gets pumped through this pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery, which is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood, and it's into the lungs, where exchange will happen. Carbon dioxide will be excreted while oxygen will be absorbed. When that happens, the blood is going to enter the blood through the pulmonary vein, which is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood, and then into the atrium. This atrium, when the atrium contracts, when it does what it does, the blood is going to enter into the left ventricle. And then when the blood enters, the valve is going to shut, and then the blood will be here. And then when the ventricle contracts, the blood is going to pass through this aortic valve into the aorta, this arc of aorta, and then into the systemic circulation. Hope you understand. If what you don't get, you go over the video and listen to it more.